Okay, so you have not seen Tiger King. You've not seen Tiger King. Basically, Tiger King is a docuseries about a bunch of insane people who like tigers, but also don't really care that much about the tigers. They care much more about their own personal self-aggrandizement. It features a bunch of different characters. So the main character is a guy named Joe Exotic, who is a gay polygamist who is gay with men who are straight, that he traded meth to them, allegedly, in order so they would have sex with him, and then he married them, and then one of them accidentally killed himself. Also, he runs a tiger zoo, but he also sells tigers to people around the country. He has a running feud with a woman named Carol Baskin, who proclaims that she is a tiger rights activist. She also happens to probably have killed her former husband and hates Joe Exotic and has been trying to shut down Joe Exotic's distribution of tigers for years, simultaneously claiming that she is a tiger rights activist while holding tigers in cages that don't look all that great in her own sort of private zoo where she has volunteers who work for no pay. And then there's a third character who sort of pops in as sort of an advisor to Joe Exotic named Doc. And Doc has basically a cult that he has set up of he'll have 17-year-old women intern for him, and then he will keep them in basically patties, like in stalls, until they realize they're supposed to have sex with him, and then they have sex with him, and then he makes them part of his harem and uses them as part of his draw to his little zoo. About 3/4 of the way through the docuseries, Joe Exotic starts being played and manipulated by a guy named Jeff Lowe. Jeff Lowe is a person who kind of likes tigers, but also is just straight up insane con man who wants to steal Joe Exotic's zoo, it appears, pretends that he is super duper wealthy while taking out enormous amounts of debt, and has a bisexual wife with whom he carries on various cavortings in Las Vegas, and who is basically trying to get Joe Exotic ousted from his own zoo and or prosecuted so he can take over the zoo. So there are your cast of characters. Joe Exotic ends up in jail. Carol Baskin ends up triumphant because she helps put Joe Exotic in jail. And Doc is, Doc, he continues to operate. Jeff Lowe ends up in charge of Joe Exotic Zoo. Joe Exotic is the tragic, Hamlet-esque Shakespearean character. What a weird and crazy and insane group of people this was. So let's go through this thing. Spoilers are allowed. So let's start with the obvious. Did Carol Baskin kill her husband? Yeah, she totally killed her husband, right? I mean, like, there's no question. I've already proposed that there is a fantastic rom-com / suspense film to be made in which Carol Baskin, after killing her new husband, meets O.J. Simpson. They meet cute at like a resort. And it's because O.J. wants to buy a tiger or something, or he just wants to adopt a tiger because she doesn't sell tigers. And they meet cute. And then only after they get married do they realize that each one of them is allegedly a murderer. And then they have to figure out exactly who is going to murder I think there's a great movie to be made there by, I'm going to recommend to Jason Blum. I don't know about you, but yes, she definitely, like, her husband randomly disappeared, just gone, poof, and he was super rich. And she was a very weird person before that. He was a weird person too, but yeah, did she, no question, she killed her husband, right? Like, the chances she didn't are like 0%. As far as whether Joe Exotic really credibly threatened Carol, the evidence there seems kind of mixed, honestly, because it seems as though that Jeff Rowe fellow was really manipulating the entire situation, right? The hitman who was being solicited by Joe Exotic was working for the guy who was trying to steal Joe Exotic's zoo, if I'm getting this correct. So I think there is a real possibility that guy was basically soliciting Joe Exotic to say a thing on tape that was going to be damaging to Joe Exotic, but Joe Exotic didn't actually pay him to kill Carol Baskin. I think that's a possibility. Now, does everyone in this documentary deserve to be in jail? Pretty much everyone deserves to be in jail. but did Joe Exotic credibly threaten Carol? Should Trump pardon Joe Exotic and then make him Secretary of the Interior? There's a possibility. Is Jeff Lowe an evil mastermind? Yeah, I mean, he certainly portrayed that way, right? I mean, okay, so first of all, it's pretty clear that Joe Exotic is supposed to be the hero of this particular piece, and Joe Exotic is a scumbag, right? In the documentary, he's basically trading meth for sex with straight dudes, which is very, very weird and creepy and horrifying, and then falling in love with the straight dudes who are having sex with him for meth, and then singing songs about them and describing graphic carnal acts at their funerals. There's so much in this thing. Like, there's just so much in this thing. But yes, Jeff Lowe appears to be a con artist, right? He appears to be a scam artist. And the idea that he sort of entrapped Joe Exotic, because Joe Exotic happens to be a pre-existing condition crazy person, that seems to me like a fairly good theory. Does that mean that Joe Exotic wasn't guilty of the crime? No. Joe Exotic could have been guilty for the crime, and Jeff Lowe could have been could have been trying to trap him. Both could be true. But Jeff Lowe is a skeezy dude, a very, very skeezy dude. Alrighty, if Tiger King were made into a movie, who would play the main character? This is a question I have seen asked before. So if you were going to cast the Tiger King movie, so there's only one obvious casting decision. So there is a character in here who looks like almost exactly like Aaron Eckhart. Eric Callie. Okay, Eric Callie is the person. No question that this person is Aaron Eckhart. Then you have who would play Joe Exotic. I've seen the suggestion that maybe it should be Edward Norton. I kind of like Edward Norton as Joe Exotic. Edward Norton's a really good actor, so I could definitely see that. I think there's a world where you have, I'm trying to think who'd be sort of a good comic actor. Maybe Owen Wilson as Joe Exotic. Would that work? McConaughey as Joe Exotic. That would, I guess so. I could see a Laura Dern, Carol Baskin, maybe. She'd have to gain a bunch of weight, obviously. Who else is Carol Baskin? Laura Linney is Carol Baskin. Laura Linney from Ozark. I've seen Stephen Merchant as Howard Baskin. That one makes sense to me. Saf is apparently a transgender person, which I didn't know. Like, if you watch the series, you don't know that Saf is a transgender person because this is clearly a woman who had her arm bit off. But apparently this is a bit of a controversy online. I've heard that Saf does not care about that. Well, I would imagine not, since Saf literally had her arm bit off by a tiger, and then they said we can reattach this, and she was like, F it, I don't need the arm. So who would play Saf? There's some people suggesting Michelle Rodriguez, which I think would work. Oh, now this is a great suggestion. So John Finlay, who is the allegedly meth addicted husband who was straight of Joe Exotic, who spends the entire documentary shirtless. And one of the great things about this documentary is dude's shirtless the entire time, and you never ask why, because everything is just so crazy. That's like the least crazy thing about this documentary. Somebody suggests Shia LaBeouf. Excellent suggestion. Travis Maldonado is the other husband who kills himself. Let's see. I could see Armie Hammer here, maybe. He's maybe a little bit too old. This is a good suggestion. As Doc Antle, as Bhagavan Doc Antle, I'm seeing suggestions of John Hamm. That is a good call. John Hamm as Doc Antle would totally work. If you were alive, Philip Seymour Hoffman as Doc Antle is dead ringer, right? I mean, like, seriously easy casting. How about Brad Pitt for Jeff Lowe? Could you see it like as a con man, as a kind of charming con man? Yeah, you could see Brad Pitt as Jeff Lowe. Although it doesn't work so well if he's like a handsome dude, right? He has to be kind of not super handsome. He has to be a guy who thinks he's handsome, but is actually not supremely handsome. All right, that's enough thoughts about Tiger King for anybody, and far too many for most. Catch you later. Now, we're going to do something we haven't done in a while. So over the last week or so, there's been a lot of attention paid to a music video. It is called WAP, okay, which we're going to get into in just one second. And it seems to me that there's a segment that we've been remiss in ignoring for a long time now on the show. We used to do it much more regularly. It was called Deconstructing the Culture. So it is time once again to deconstruct the culture, where we take an important piece of popular culture and we break it down for its important aspects in American life. So let's deconstruct a little bit of culture. So there's this video that went out. It is by a person named Cardi B, who has a rather checkered past. I mean, she's talked on video about how she used to drug men and steal their money after bringing them back as what, a quasi-prostitute, something like that. And then she became a rapper, so American success story. And there's another rapper whose name is Megan Thee Stallion. I assume this is her given name. Their last name is Stallion, and her parents named her Megan Thee. And I don't know why her middle name is Thee as opposed to The, but apparently you are the Stallion. Not just the art of the Stallion. In any case, there's this new video, and just as a preface to this video, let me note some of the headlines about this video from mainstream outlets. The headline from Complex was, "Why Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion's empowering anthem, WAP, is so important." It's very important, guys. This is a very, very empowering, important anthem. Grammy.com, they put out like people who do the Grammy Awards, they put out a headline, "Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion deliver a juicy collaboration with WAP." Wow. I mean, it must be important. Metro, UK, put out a headline. The backlash to Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion's WAP proves society still hates sexually powerful women. Apparently, according to Billboard, Christina Aguilera is feeling some type of way about Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion's WAP. This is a deeply important piece of art, guys. And then Black Entertainment TV, BET, they put out a headline. Cardi B perfectly claps back at misogynistic criticism of WAP. Because all criticism of WAP is misogynistic, like deeply misogynistic and sexist, as it turns out. And this video, this music video, had 56 million views within 48 hours of release because it got all sorts of press, and it was deeply important. This is a deeply important piece of American art that we should all pay attention to. It is deeply empowering. So we're going to play a little bit of the video, and then I'm going to read you some of the lyrics to WAP, which stands for a thing. I can't say most of the words in this song. I mean, I can pronounce them, but if I say them aloud, then we will be banned by the FCC. So here is a little bit of this video. So there are a few sort of giveaways. Here. So first of all, a bucket and a mop for this wet-ass P word. So first of all, she had to clarify whether wet-ass P word was a description of the P word or whether one of the clinical symptoms here was also diarrhea. But bring a bucket and a mop. So this suggests that there's an awful lot of, not to be too graphic, but some sort of medical discharge that's happening here. Like a lot too much, right? A lot too much, because that's a symptom of something that is not going great. Apparently, there are signs of prolapse. And I say that because hop on top, I want to ride, I do a Kegel while it's inside. So there's some signs of some actual clinical prolapse, which is a problem. Also, there's some talk about where this person is putting their nose, and there's some talk about smelling, right? There's a line here about gagging and choking, which suggests that perhaps there's an odor issue here. Also, at some point in here, there's a reference to diabetes, about a person who engages in particular activity and ends up diabetic, which suggests a serious pH imbalance. So I asked my wife for a differential diagnosis for the sake of these ladies in case they need to go to the doctor. I mean, like, this is a problem. I mean, like, if this is real, like, there's water pouring out the front doors of this place, and that ain't water, guys. I mean, that's what I'm being told. That ain't water. So the medical here was her differential. Her differential diagnosis, my wife, the doctor, was either these women are suffering from bacterial vaginosis or a yeast infection, or my wife suggested most probably they are suffering from trichomonas. So just a bit of medical advice. You know, put aside the empowerment. I understand how empowering it is for women to sing about the moisture state of their genitals. And I understand that anybody who criticizes this as reductive of female sexuality and or of putting out images of females as over-sexualized in a way that is negative, that puts negative images in men and drives negative images toward women for men, treating them as sex objects. I understand that stuff is out of bounds, right? I mean, if we mention any of that stuff, it's because we're misogynists. I'm a sexist for saying that women are more than just, their wet-ass P words. But as a sympathetic human being, I just want to make sure these ladies get the care they need. My wife's medical advice is that they go to a gynecologist ASAP, and that they do whatever checks are necessary for bacterial vaginosis, yeast infection, or trichomonas. Joining us on the line is Andrew Klavan, my good friend, host of The Andrew Klavan Show over at dailywire.com. Go check him out. You've heard him sub-host for me sometimes. I know it's a bad day when he sub-hosts, but sometimes he does it, and he's, mediocre. Andrew, thanks for joining the show.
Shapiro, what a great introduction. Thanks.
Okay, so before we jump into news of the day, I know that you had a take on Martin Scorsese's Irishman, which is now winning all of the Critics Awards. I watched it. It took me several days because the movie, you actually have to clear an enormous block of time, and I don't have that sort of time. And I don't feel like I lost anything by watching it 15 minutes at a time because the thing never ended. It was like Wagnerian ring cycle, and nothing happens for basically 3 hours, and then Robert De Niro, spoiler alert, dies.
Yeah, it's a terrible movie. It's just a bad movie, and it's the reason it's a bad movie is because it's not about what it seems to be about. That technique where they make the actors look younger. They've got Al Pacino, who's 80 or whatever, and Robert De Niro, who's 80, and Joe Pesci. They're all so old, and they use computer techniques to make them look. They try to make them look like they're 20, but they look like they're about 40. Plus, it's just a 40-year-old face on this hunched, slow 80-year-old body, and they talk. They still have those gruff 80-year-old voices. And the reason they did that is because those are the guys who kind of brought Martin Scorsese along. Those are the guys from Mean Streets, the guys who were stars of his big movies. And the movie is really about Martin Scorsese saying goodbye to filmmaking and to a genre that he loved that really doesn't resonate that much anymore. It was kind of like a bad version of The Tempest, where Shakespeare has Prospero like bury his wand and his magic book in the ground, saying goodbye to his arts, you know. And this was really about Scorsese saying goodbye to his film. And that's very self-indulgent. It's not what we go to the movies to see. We don't go to movies to see movies about movies. You know, and so none of the characters really made sense. Plus, the history is all ridiculous. I mean, it's about Jimmy Hoffa, and that's not what happened to Jimmy Hoffa, even though some of it is still a mystery. We know better than that. So it was just boring.
Yeah, I thought it was awful. By the way, I don't know if you've seen Ford versus Ferrari yet. That's a good film.
I hear that's great. I haven't seen it yet. I like Knives Out, and you're in it. There's a Ben Shapiro analog in Knives Out.
Yeah, you're not the first person to tell me this. There are a couple reviewers who said the same thing. So now I definitely will not watch that movie. I'm also very much looking forward to not watching Bombshell, which is this new Oscar bait flick. I do love that Hollywood is like, we take Me Too so seriously that we're making 2 separate movies about Roger Ailes, one for HBO and one for general mass circulation, and 0 movies about Harvey Weinstein.
And
Let's not talk about that ever.
And not only that, George Stephanopoulos, who covered up the women for Clinton, is now at the ABC where they're covering up the Jeffrey Epstein story.
Exciting. Okay, so Drew, I'd be remiss if I did not ask your opinion on the brilliant performance by our Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, today. She announced that, indeed, the Democrats will impeach, which is about as shocking as Rosie O'Donnell coming out of the closet way back when. I mean, it's just that there was no shock involved. Obviously, from the moment they announced impeachment inquiry, it was moving in this direction. And then she got very offended that anyone would suggest that she's doing this because she hates Trump, because as a good Catholic, she hates no one, except for unborn babies, apparently. So what was your take on all this shebang?
It's so sad. I mean, first of all, I feel that Pelosi was kind of pushed off a building by the left. I mean, she knows this is bad medicine. She knows this is no good. That people don't care. Nobody cares. Chuck Todd is on MSNBC saying they should force the candidates to stop campaigning so people will watch these impeachment hearings. The impeachment hearings have been a goat rodeo. They've been embarrassing. I mean, it really is. It's just terrible. And to have Nancy Pelosi go on and parade her sorrow and her love of America and her dedication to the founding is just absurd. Yesterday, at these Judiciary Committee hearings, they had these 3 law professors come on and say, "Oh yes, you know, we have to impeach Donald Trump." One of them, this guy Noah Feldman, had written a huge article for the New York Times magazine praising Sharia law. I mean, this is who their experts are. One of them hated Trump so much she had to cross the street when she was near the hotel in Washington, beautiful hotel that Trump built. I mean, these are like loons. But the whole thing has been about these credentialed elites coming forward and saying, well, we don't really know anything, but we don't like the president. That's been the entire thing. Yep. Guys in uniform come forward and the New York Times says, oh, look at their gray hair. Isn't there the chiseled features of their veracity? It's just amazing. And we're supposed to go like, oh, okay, you know, well, you guys must be important credentialed people, so we'll give up our elected president. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's absurd on its face. It's also absurd. I mean, listen, I have the credentials and you have the no hair, and yet we are apparently not reassuring enough for the American public.
We're sane. I think that's the crime. You know?
Well, honestly, the most enjoyable story of the week, obviously, was Kamala Harris dropping out of the presidential race. We're both from California, and watching her campaign just implode, just completely collapse in on itself and create a black hole was just unbelievably wonderful in every respect. What's your quick take on Kamala Harris dropping out?
Well, it's a long fall from the top tier, and I think she just fell. She just fell for the press. The press looked at her. She's black. She's a woman. They thought, perfect. She'll be the perfect president. She was. Even you and I were worried about her when she first entered. We were both worried about her, but she was a terrible candidate. She was unappealing. She had that horrible cackling laugh. All she wants to do is ban people. Plus, she bragged about how tough she was as a prosecutor, which the left hates. They think all the criminals should be let free because they're just oppressed minorities ruined by evil America. So she really had nowhere to go at any time, and Tulsi Gabbard really just kind of crushed her.
And so it was definitely fun to watch. Well, Drew, I'm glad that you could stop by, or at least I'm, sort of wishy-washy on this thing. So Drew, thanks so much for stopping by. That's Andrew Klavan. You can catch his show over at dailywire.com. It's why you should subscribe at dailywire.com/subscribe and join our team. Drew, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it, dude.
Great talking to you.
So we are going to rank all of the Star Wars films canonically, but we're going to go worst to best, worst to best. I know, we already know what the best one is, but we'll start worst to best. Okay, the worst Star Wars film, Phantom Menace, charting in at number 11. Now, I know a lot of people think Attack of the Clones goes here. You're going to be shocked where I put Attack of the Clones. A lot of people say Last Jedi. I hear you. I hear you. Last Jedi is hot garbage. It's a terrible film. A truly terrible film filled with plot holes and stupidity. Phantom Menace, however, is worse. The reason that Phantom Menace is worse is because George Lucas makes a critical error. He thinks that the reason that kids like Star Wars is because they want to see kids. This is one of the big errors that a lot of people who make kids films do. I mean, Pixar doesn't make this error, by the way. Pixar does not make films exclusively about small children. Kids don't actually want to watch kids. Kids kind of want to be adults. Making Jedi Anakin 6 years old is really weird. And then making Jedi Anakin significantly younger than Padme is super duper weird and becomes even weirder in the future movies. Everything with young Anakin is almost unwatchable. Liam Neeson is fine. Ewan McGregor is fine. They are criminally underused in this film. And the film just is exorbitantly long. It's really long. I remember seeing it in the theater, being really excited for it and walking out going, eh. It was not an auspicious beginning to the prequels. Okay, number 10, Last Jedi, obviously. Last Jedi is just flamingly bad. A flamingly bad film. Now, there could have been a moment where the film could have gotten good, right? There's a moment where Rey and Kylo look like they're gonna team up, and then it's gonna radically change the history of Star Wars, that suddenly the dark side and the light side are fighting on the same side, and all of a sudden the universe changes radically. And then Rian Johnson, because he's an idiot, he has them separate off again, and then you get the ridiculous Luke Skywalker hologram face-off with Kylo Ren, and you get the idiocy of a film in which you basically redo the Battle of Hoth, except you make it on a salt planet, and then you say it's a salt planet 10 times so that people don't think that it's just the Ice Battle of Hoth all over again, when it's obviously just the Ice Battle of Hoth all over again. They totally should have killed Finn. They totally should have killed what's the name of the person everyone forgets? Rose. Everyone understands. They should have killed Rose. That would have at least given it some stakes. The Last Jedi totally destroys Luke Skywalker's character. And this is one of the problems, as we will see when we get to the next one. One of the problems with the new trilogy is that it is based on destroying all of your old characters. Number 9, Force Awakens. Again, people are gonna think this is controversial. It is not controversial. Force Awakens is a bad film. The reason it is a bad film is not because on its own it is such a bad film. The reason is because it takes all of your old characters and just murders them in front of your eyes. Literally murders them. It takes all the characters you grew up with and loved and who made your childhood, Han Solo, and turns Han Solo into a loser divorced dad flying around the universe like Cheech and Chong smoking dope in the Millennium Falcon, and then has him murdered at the hands of his own son because Leia is too chicken to go confront her own son. Now, as you will see, you're going to be shocked by where I rank Rise of Skywalker. J.J. Abrams does try to fix this with some lens flare in Rise of Skywalker, but the fact is that Force Awakens is a criminal act against the Star Wars legacy. They decided they were going to kill off all of the olds in order to build characters who are significantly less interesting than the old characters in the first place and kill off your childhood in the process. I could not hate Force Awakens more than I hate Force Awakens. I walked out of the theater and I thought, okay, that was all right. And then every waking moment since then I've thought about Force Awakens, I've gotten angrier at Force Awakens. And so it ranks among the worst of the Star Wars films. Number 8, Attack of the Clones. Now, everybody hates Attack of the Clones. I've heard people say Attack of the Clones is the worst of the prequels. It is not the worst of the prequels. Phantom Menace is a worse film than Attack of the Clones. Why? Because Christopher Lee is great. And Count Dooku's character is poorly written, but Count Dooku is the secret hero of the Star Wars prequels. Count Dooku is not wrong. He is a separatist from a Senate that has been taken over secretly by a Sith Lord. He's the only one who knows this. And he is set off to move on outside of a trade federation that is instituting tariffs against planets he doesn't wish to see tariffed. He's a free trade libertarian, Count Dooku. Beyond that, he has a pretty good lightsaber battle with both Ewan McGregor and Yoda. The basic plotting of it is more interesting than Phantom Menace. Now, it does have some of the worst romance in the history of film, right? I mean, everything involving Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman. It's a horror show. It's death. You are smoother than Sand Milady is one of the worst lines in the history. I hate sand, it's coarse and... Oh my God. Oh my God. It is that film that more than any really destroyed my perception of Natalie Portman as a decent actress. I still think that she is wildly overrated. But with that said, is it better than Phantom Menace? Yes, because at least you start to get flashes of what's going to happen in Revenge of the Sith, which, as we will see, actually is a pretty good movie. Okay, number 7, Solo. Here we move on into the movies that are watchable. Right, we've now moved into the arena of movies that you would rewatch if you saw them beginning on TNT. Right, where you're flipping through it and you see a scene and you need to watch it. Right, if you're flipping through and you see something from Force Awakens, like nope. You see something from Phantom Menace, you're like double nope. Something from Attack of the Clones, like hey, hey. You see something from Solo, maybe you'll stop. Now, I know a lot of people are down on Solo. I'm not sure why. I think Solo is amusing. It's kind of fun. It doesn't sell out Han Solo's character the way that the sequels do, right? The sequels actually destroy Han Solo's character. They turn him from his whole hero's journey in the original Star Wars, Han Solo, is from rogue who only cares about himself and is a mercenary to self-sacrificing general in the Resistance who's going to get married at the end and have little Jedi babies with Leia, right? That is his hero's journey. And then they completely revert him back to rogue who only cares about himself in the sequels. Solo doesn't do that. Solo is starting that journey. The problem with Solo is that it sort of gives him the hero's journey before the hero's journey. He has to start off with being this dissolute rogue who is cynical and nasty, right? That has to be the hero's journey beginning in episode 4. Solo precedes that. He already has sympathies towards the rebellion. He already is showing some aspects of self-sacrifice, which is kind of weird. That's the problem with Solo. Also, I will say that the Kessel Run is completely misdone. If you take a shortcut in the Kessel Run, it doesn't count as you doing it in less than 12 parsecs. But it's got some amusing moments. The robot in Solo is one of the better robots. One of the better droids in all of Star Wars. So Solo ranks at number 7. Rise of Skywalker at number 6. So people hated Rise of Skywalker because they are wrong. Rise of Skywalker has half of the movie is just throwaway nonsense. Right, the very beginning where you have the Millennium Falcon hopping and skipping planet to planet is really dumb and useless and very J.J. Abrams. The part of it that's good is that it actually goes back to respecting the legacy of Star Wars. Because remember, Force Awakens killed off Han Solo for no apparent reason in order to kill off the old to make room for the new. Last Jedi then decided to go even further and kill off Luke Skywalker as a good character, and then kill off the idea that the Skywalker family matters at all because apparently random kids just get the Force, and which undercuts the entire trilogy. Rise of Skywalker retcons, basically Rise of Skywalker is, what if I just crap all over Rian Johnson? And I'm all for it, man. I am there for it. Basically, it is, we're going to retcon this entire history. We're going to shoehorn Leia into, she was actually a Jedi. We're going to retcon Luke into, why aren't you respecting Jedi traditions? No burning of Jedi books, no throwing away of lightsabers. Why aren't you respecting Jedi traditions? We retcon Han Solo into, yeah, he's a hero who cared about his son and was willing to self-sacrifice. We retcon everything. We retcon everything. And we make the biggest retcon of all, which is the most important one, which is that Rey is actually Palpatine's granddaughter. Now, naturally, Disney screwed this up, and they tried to retcon the retcon afterward, right? They tried to suggest that Palpatine was actually a clone Palpatine. He wasn't actually Palpatine. Okay, I understand. Palpatine died at the end of Return of the Jedi. I also understand, whatever, man. Okay, whatever. It's got to actually be Palpatine if this is to have any meaning at all. But it makes sense that she's Palpatine's granddaughter because the most powerful Force being in the galaxy is indeed Emperor Palpatine. So for her to do that, it completely solves the Mary Jane problem, which was a huge problem in Force Awakens, that she picks up a lightsaber and suddenly she's fighting Ben Solo, who's been training for 20 years and has Skywalker blood. Right now, she's like, well, no, I'm a Palpatine kid. He's wounded, I'm a Palpatine kid. Check this out, right? Like, okay, got it. That makes sense. Now that makes sense. They bring back all the old music from Return of the Jedi, which is great. They bring back a lot of the old scenery from Return of the Jedi, which is just fantastic. They allow Han a better goodbye, which was necessary because the way they killed him in Force Awakens is disrespectful. They allowed Luke a better goodbye by having him force raise from the grave the X-Wing in the same way that Yoda did, which is really fantastic, as opposed to the idiotic way they got rid of him in Last Jedi, where he basically Joe Biden's it, right? I mean, he just sort of like plots and disappears of old age, and then just so you could have that shot of the two suns like Tatooine, oh, I see the parallelism. Ugh, God, Rian Johnson. Okay, so Rise of Skywalker comes in at number 6 because it actually respects the tradition, and you get points for that. Number 5, Return of the Jedi. So Return of the Jedi, I would say 2/3 of this movie is fantastic and 1/3 of it is silly. Everything that is Luke and Darth Vader related is just great. The final throne room stuff is just fantastic. All of that is great. It has great music. The dynamic between Palpatine, Ian McDermott is fantastic. The dynamic between Palpatine and Darth Vader and Luke is the best thing about the movie. Han becoming a more responsible human being is good. The entire speeder scene is actually a very cool scene on Endor. The second Death Star and the plot to trap the rebels is good. Even Lando flying the Millennium Falcon makes some sense. The Ewoks are not great. The space battle doesn't seem to have tremendous consequences. It's obviously not as impactful as the New Hope space battle, but in concluding the trilogy, it's good. Also, the Jabba stuff at the beginning, there's a great thread I saw from a friend of mine, Frank Fleming, online, where he completely deconstructs the Jabba stuff. Like, what was Luke's actual plan? So his plan was, I'm gonna send the droids in, and then do they get kept by Jabba, or do they not? Like, he'd have to then rescue the droids, right? Because if Jabba had kept the droids and be like, okay, here's Han, would they have just left R2 and C-3PO there? No. So he has Lando in there undercover. Lando never actually does anything undercover. Then he sends in the droids to be captured for no apparent reason. Then he sends in Leia to make the trade with Jabba for Han, but now he still has to rescue C-3PO and R2. Then he shows up, but he doesn't actually just brandish the lightsaber and tell Jabba he's gonna blow him away, like kill him, unless he releases all of his friends. He proceeds to be thrown into a Rancor pit, which presumably Lando knew about and could have warned him about. Like, the beginning makes no sense. It's fun, but it makes no sense. With that said, Return of the Jedi, the conclusion of the trilogy is very moving, and it definitely works. Revenge of the Sith is number 4. Now, Revenge of the Sith, I rewatched it recently. It's good. It's a good movie. Revenge of the Sith, the last 2/3 of it is really good. Everything from when Palpatine becomes overtly maniacal to the end. Order 66, that whole sequence is very effective, where you're seeing all of these Jedi get shot down and killed. All of that is really effective. The Hayden Christensen turn at the end is good. It actually works emotionally when Ewan McGregor is upset about all of this. Now, Hayden Christensen still can't act, but that's just the wages of sin. It's good. There's a lot in Revenge of the Sith that's great. The final lightsaber battle is excellent. The big flaw in Revenge of the Sith is that the sort of rationale for why Darth Vader becomes Darth Vader doesn't really work too well, because the question becomes why he still works for the Emperor afterward, right? Because he apparently falls to the dark side because he wants the power to be able to save Padme. Okay, Padme dies. So why is he still hanging out with the Emperor at that point? The Emperor made him a promise. The Emperor didn't fulfill the promise. Also, we all know that the Sith Apprentice tries to kill the Sith Master, so why doesn't he just try and kill Palpatine like right away and take control of the galaxy if that's really what he's up to? It's weird that he becomes sort of a functionary in the galactic regime of Palpatine after it turns out that his wife died and Palpatine didn't do anything to save him, to save her. Number 3, I'm gonna go off the board. You ready for this one? Rogue One. Yeah, I know, a lot of people want to put Revenge of the Sith or ROTJ, Return of the Jedi, on this list at this point. I go Rogue One. I think Rogue One is an actually really well-made film. Rogue One is fascinating. It has just enough tips of the hat to the original Star Wars trilogy to draw you in. Also, the ending of it is shocking, right? This is one of the new Star Wars films, and one of the original kind of Star Wars recognitions is that nobody who's a major character except Alec Guinness dies in the first 3 Star Wars. Right? Not a single major character who's a hero dies in the first 3 Star Wars, at least not of old age, right? I mean, Yoda dies of old age. But Rogue One kills off all the main characters at the end, which is a shock. I remember watching this in the theater for the first time. I was like, whoa, what did they just do? They just set you up with all of these characters who you actually like, and then they kill all of them? Somebody described, I made fun of them at the time, but they were kind of right. They described Rogue One as an actual war film, as in not just Star Wars, but an actual war film, and that's right. I mean, this is about human sacrifice and what people are willing to do in order to accomplish a mission, including giving up your life if you're, in this case, probably 25 years old, as the main heroes of the plot are. So Rogue One is really good. Also, the final scene where Darth Vader finally lets loose is just ridiculously good. And if you ever watch the mashup of the end of Rogue One and the beginning of New Hope, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. They just take the very end of Rogue One, where Darth Vader is just cutting a swath through people, and then the beginning of episode 4, where Darth Vader catches the Tantive 4, and they just mash it up and it works perfectly. It's beautiful. Number 2 is A New Hope. And there's some controversy over whether A New Hope should go in front of Empire, the only reason being that Empire wouldn't exist without New Hope. But New Hope is, in and of itself, a very good movie. Now, I know these movies hold up because I've shown them to my 6 and my 3-year-old, and they love them. I mean, they are into them. I've shown them some of the new movies, not as much. A New Hope is fantastic. It's creative. It's interesting. It obviously follows all the beats in Joseph Campbell. So it is famously reflective of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. It's got some of the best lines in movie history, stuff that everybody quotes all the time. It's got great legit actors like Alec Guinness alongside newcomers like Harrison Ford. The initial opening is so good. I actually use the initial opening as an explanation of how politics ought to work in a campaign, because the initial opening is all Darth Vader, right? You don't meet Luke for the first 20 minutes of the film, basically, the first 15 minutes of the film. And that's because you first have to establish the bad guys before you establish the good guys. It's a good lesson for people who are running in politics. If you ever want to run a political campaign, first establish who your opponent is, and then it makes it easier to establish who you are. And finally, as you all know, number 1, this is not a question, this is not a theory, this is not an opinion, it is a simple fact. Empire Strikes Back is the best of the Star Wars movies and one of the best movies of all time. My father assures me that when people saw this in the theaters, they literally could not believe. They had to wait until Return of the Jedi came out for confirmation that Darth Vader was telling the truth. People doubted it, even after watching Empire Strikes Back. It's a brilliant movie. One of the things that's great about the movie is it's really about how Han Solo is competent. And one of the things that that Disney has done with the Star Wars universe that's really stupid is they've decided that basically all the male characters are radically incompetent. In the original Star Wars, pretty much everybody's good at their job, right? Princess Leia is competent. Han Solo is competent. Luke Skywalker is increasingly competent. Darth Vader is competent. It's a bunch of competent people. You know what makes for interesting plots? Competent people. Empire Strikes Back is all about how Han Solo is shockingly competent at all the things he's attempting to do. How he's a rogue, and the writing is fantastic. Lawrence Kasdan does a beautiful job with the script. Also, everything Yoda related is just tremendous. And of course, it has a phenomenal score from John Williams. Empire Strikes Back, obviously, #1 on the list with a bullet. I mean, it is not close. Alrighty, well, May the 4th be with you. And in honor of May the 4th, tonight we have an All Access Live. We'll be discussing all of this. To be part of the All Access Live, you have to actually become a member over at dailywire.com/subscribe. Go become an All Access member. You get 25% off, 1/4 off. Get it? 1/4, May the 4th. You get it? You get it? Get it? All you have to do is use promo code EMPIRE, because it is indeed the greatest of all the Star Wars films. And we'll see you on All Access Live a little bit later, dailywire.com/subscribe.